Hmm.
We typically had okay luck at like the studio Sundays, but I did too. It's like usually when we've done our lecture series, it's still like the February through like May, so I feel so. We'll see. So I'm wondering maybe yeah, like you said, maybe evening time would work better, but I don't know. Kind of have to. It's finicky. It's like you think sometimes you do everything right, and it's just who knows. That's sort of features me. Yeah. But we had half a dozen people pre-register, so as long as everyone showed up, we should have a handful and whole thing. We'll see.
Can
I know
I?
back in the day too, when like you didn't have any internet or anything, you just had to like show up and see what would happen. Yeah.
So now, notice it's now,
Right. Well, sometimes things like that would be better. But I know it's just every channel you can get even emails. It's like I find myself even like I read a lot of emails all the time. I know a lot of things just because if you get like back in all your emails or whatever, then the one email that you wanted is stuck behind it, and you're like, oh, I missed that. It's just exactly. I find it easier to go through like my work emails, and I'll like get rid of the ones that I the spammy ones, but then with my personal one, I get so many, and then also someone like, maybe I do want that post, maybe I don't, go by it, and it's like you end up with like 20 more before you're like, oh, I should have deleted that. Exactly, it's like the idea of maybe. Oh.
Okay, why is this thing not turning on? Yeah, 1 o'clock now.
So we had, which I think we've had here before. We had a gentleman talk about historic gardening. We had he's local in town, Hoxie. We've had Nancy Rubin Stewart. She talked about Mercy exploring. We did a kind of panel. It wasn't really a lecture. It was more like a panel discussion on Storm Creek. We had Mark Coop from Plymouth, who's a food historian. She talked about brown bread.
Bless you.
And then a couple other local, you may have, he's actually, I think, done a lot more in Barnstable Sturgis Library, Greg Williams. So he talked about Sheba Spooner, who was local to town, but then moved off Cape. It was kind of, she was kind of a sordid history. She was with her husband and like shoved her all that. So it's kind of, I think I had that last week tour for September, so yeah, I try to kind of go on, both local history and then also just general. Yeah. Next year we're hoping to have some things related to the 250. for the revolution, so. So you said you were in, was it law as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just do presentation. So I always wanted.
Yeah.
Right. I really just need some, it's been a nice marriage. It's worked. I'm not doing presentation. Professional.
Right, which is good.
Yeah. And I'm trying to retire, I would love to stop doing law, but.
One of our board members, John Kennedy, is a lawyer in town too. He does more elder law.
Oh. That's good.
Yes, I would say so. But I think the same thing. I think he's been at it for a long time. So.
Get yourself out of it.
Yes, in English, yeah. So still very active clientele, and a lot of, connections from years, going back years.
I know them, so I'm like, oh, sure, but I keep saying I'm supposed to say no, I'm supposed to stop.
Yeah. We get some people. We will.
They were telling me, the stars you have to pay for it, get the whole shipment.
Yes. And also like a lot of them have minimum orders too, so it's like depending on what company or what product you're getting, you can't just try, we're just going to test it out with like 4, like you have to order, like especially for special order, like if we're doing something like the wallpaper, you want to make a minimum, so it's an investment.
Yeah. So when I joined Portuguese, they had stuff. And she told me later, and all the things they were able to say.
You're probably like, oh, so you're like, oh, you're just all like, well, we just at our, so typically, this is our only space that we can really keep heated all year long. The house does have like very minimal heat in it, and everything just sleeps, over there. So we're closed during the off season. So last Saturday was our big push for like we had sale table to certain things that were like, okay, like this didn't sell as well as like we thought it was going to. Let's mark it down. You get 50% off. Like so we get this big table money. It's hard to. We're trying to hear more kids also. And I'm talking about this with her, and it's just it's just a hard thing to grab here, especially with the little ones we try to make sure we try to interpret like outdoors, like, oh, maybe the parents don't want to bring their kids on, maybe they're afraid they're gonna like not get the artifacts, so let's do something outdoor, but like, you know, so that's something we're trying to cultivate, you know, more kids here, but yeah, let's try. We're kind of off the beaten path to where
it's further than I thought it was.
yeah, that's like the Oxy Medicine Tap is a very similar institution to ours, and they have, you know, pretty good visitation. I mean, some days like us, like we're friends with the directors there, and these things, some days you get, you know, nobody, some days you get 5 people, some days you get 20 people, it all just depends. But I think because they're right on.
I know, I was driving with my daughter and her fiance, and we were leaving Sandwich, we just got to Heritage, and I was like, oh my God, I slammed on the brakes, and I'm like, there's somebody else back there, so turn around back.
So that's part of it too, is like, unless you are like, know that this is a pet where you don't get to 6A, like, you know, you get some people that, you know, yeah, we just were driving by, but it's not, you know, we typically get more, oh, we've driven by 1,000 times and never stopped in, and now we just decided to stop in.
I think it's a good year to sign out on 6A.
Yeah.
You know,
See,
that's how I found you too. Yeah, I kept driving by, but it is far.
Yeah, it's fast. Right, like there's not, I mean, there's stuff to do with these things, but there's also like spread card, like, you know, what is it, the Painted Daisy, the same thing that they're going to do with Painted Daisy, I was gonna say. It's this cute little gift shop, and I came off Cleveland Meeting House Road and turned, and then it's like almost in West Barnstable, I feel like. So like, it's like I'm trying to go, did I go by it? I don't think so. Like, was I supposed to turn left instead of right? And you know, it just is long.
6A can be hard to get.
Yeah.
Especially here in town, it's like, I'm like, I feel like I've been driving for miles. Am I where I'm supposed to be? No, it's like 2 more miles, so it's like, it's a long road. And, yeah.
I know it's funny, this weekend actually, my neighbor from Boston is coming down, guys, we stay in the house. And I'm like, that's good, we always go to the Black Pearl, the knitting store.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I'm all, I always feel so, I'm like, oh, let's just remember next time, I will be there soon, you know, I'm like, this is crazy far away.
Did you pass it? Yeah.
Like Joanna's and stuff, I feel like it must be good, but they must be getting better business now, so well, yeah.
You know, they're funny, I mean, you guys don't know anything now, right? Because
I don't get.
she's the owner is the most unpleasant person I've ever met.
Oh, no.
That's not good.
And this is a business.
Right, yeah.
You know, and we come every year, and there's 7 of us walking in buying huge quantities of wool. And she'd be like, hello.
Yeah.
She barely acknowledges you when you walk in the door. She doesn't help at all. And she's really surly. I'm like,
It's not
this is a smile.
Yeah.
But she's the only wool shop around.
It's like one of those, you know, like the restaurants where the help is like, kind of rude, and it's like a thing, like, oh, it's up, come on, I'm here, like, that's what you want.
We're gonna go to the rude, you know, you know, shop.
Well,
Yeah, they had it in Salem for a time, and there was a tea shop down there. And it's like, I love tea, so I wanted to go. And we had never been before, and it's called Angelina's Tea. So like we walk in, and you know, kind of expecting, I guess something, I guess you'd say more like food than what it was, but it was just very like bare bones, like the tea up against the wall. It was a cool shop, but it was just not what we were expecting, I guess you could say. And then my brother jokingly was like, oh, like Angelina is here to decorate or something. And the guy kind of was like, she's like, that's close. Oh, and then he was like, very like rude to us the rest of the time we were there. And like, you're like, oh my, we didn't know it was the owner, like you're shopping around or whatever. But then it was just kind of like, we were like, now we talking about, remember that time we went to that room, like, to shop, like.
But I think, it's important to be like greeted friendly. Like I tell the people sort of, and I worked at the glass museum for a number of years, and when somebody came in, I always tell them this story about my wife and I were going down 28, some new ice cream truck. I always said, oh, I want to stop first. All right, let's go. So we stopped and they had one of those windows outside, like, oh, all right, let's open the window. I said, like, no one ever came, like, oh, maybe we're supposed to go inside. So we go inside, we weren't sure where to go, there's no around. We wind up leaving, you know, like, I don't know, when somebody walks in that door, everyone's attention is to the door.
Right.
Well, welcome them, greet them, and tell them what's happening, you know, everyone should do that everywhere.
They're nice, you know.
Yeah. Welcome.
How
are you?
Good, good. Fine. Yes, you did. Well, packaging. Yeah. So you checked off. Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm just trying to get this Kathleen to talk to me. She is talking
Oh, okay. I have not. So, we're actually, there's communicating with the legal board members.
Oh, yeah.
University of Shields and then Judy.
Yeah, said she volunteered to do something.
I think she said you might want to be a docent for a day or a shift. Yeah, so if you communicate on that. Okay, yeah, great. Would you know, Robert, this is our presenter, Jeanne.
Nice to meet you.
And this is Robert, our community outreach manager. And he actually was involved at the Glass Museum for like 20 years.
20+ years, yeah.
Yeah.
What did you get?
Well, I did, yeah, then I wanted to move forward, but I was the retail manager and did the website, and did the accounting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so who's the guy now? Dan.
Oh, Dan does it.
So I was Dan, I was Andy, I
You're
was,
Susan.
yeah, and kind of all at once.
Wow.
Yeah. And
And
more.
what is that?
And what the super is, I was going to.
Oh.
Let's see, I went to Florida in 2021, and I still work remotely to help Andy and Dan and work with Hannah and Susan as well, but 3 years after, so up till pretty recent, yeah.
Yeah, I just joined the club.
Oh,
I
neat.
started as a volunteer in March, and then with the curator,
I met her.
she went to school, so.
Oh, cool. I actually met her here,
Oh, okay.
in person for the first time, yeah.
Oh, because she came to our opening.
Yeah. It was, you know, we borrowed the Chipman chainsaw and,
Freeman.
Freeman, I'm sorry, yeah. For some reason, I always picture that painting of Captain Chipman, you know, mustache, every time I see that.
Yeah, I have no idea why the thing.
Yeah. Maybe just because it's a nice painting.
Yeah, we all have reporting with us.
Right. It's huge. That's right. Yeah, and I also, I portrayed Captain Burgess in the dining room.
No way.
Yeah, no, yeah,
That's
it was some time ago.
Yeah, when was that?
Pretty close to it, yeah. So that's how I was like, oh, I was working there so long, and people come in and like, some people would recognize me and some people wouldn't. And I'm like, unfortunately, like, I was still kind of a kid when that was. He's not aging anymore, but I'm out here in the front lines aging, and people going with, that your son, that would know.
Working for many years though, because I think so, because or at least it
Yes.
wasn't well known, because I had been like, or not every year, but I had, you know, a handful of times, you know, half a dozen or so.
Yeah,
Throughout my childhood and adulthood, and I had never been in there until April, and I went with one of my coworkers, one of my colleagues, and then when Robert applied here, you know, in June, she's like, oh, like you've seen it before. She's like, yeah, remember, like asking you about, you know, portrait, and I was like, well, you know, that was also like 2 months ago, no, I don't really remember, but too, it was just, yeah.
it had a lot of issues. The director, Bruce Corson, a few directors ago, when I first, he made a lot of really great exhibits, but he made them by hand. And he used a lot of mismatched technologies, and over time, like, all right, that thing broke, all right, that no longer exists either, so I was gonna have to try to find someone who could possibly fix it. So you have to figure out how the whole thing worked.
Well, you know, Jay, Susan doesn't Jay.
Yeah, and I think Jay actually fixed dining room and the candle exhibit, the
Oh,
lighting
yeah,
exhibit.
right, yeah,
I think he does both,
yeah.
because it was the same thing, Bruce did that as well, all by himself. And, the theater used to be great too, those walls used to open, that
You know, I
hallway
was
to
sitting
people.
there the other day, and I noticed there were things around that.
Yeah,
Behind it.
the little desks, and that's where the same kind of had these slanted pieces of glass in the hallway. It was a great presentation, but those doors were a big danger. Because they swung open right over the ground, they were very heavy, and it was like,
So,
he kind of engineered that himself too, and it was just, it's like, and I used to tell him, and that was one of the reasons why that thing stopped, they were afraid of that, and I was like, why don't they just have, it's really fishing line, that's pulling them back, why don't they just have like a curtain, and a fishing line's pulling them through, I don't know. I think just the same thing, a lot of mismanagement.
Well, so funny, so my first week after the job, I had to go to the dining room to say, fire, but then we started our football on, we were coming off, Packers, so I know it's always one county. And I sort of went, oh, it looks kind of cool, so I just had to go up, and I looked down.
oh, yes, you did tell me that, you did tell me.
With what, moss?
Oh, my.
Oh.
Grass.
Yeah, it's so dark, you can turn it off outside.
That's making me itch.
They're all over me. Oh. It's dark, no one ever goes in there, yeah.
So I ended up ordering a synthetic one, and then the guy who was helping out for the facilities and stuff like that, I heard him, default the tables, and then in the back, and then, take the old rug out, and that's where we realized like how weird your office was, because so they must have put the rug down first, and then the wires under that table, which is quite like, the table bed is just like, how it's.
Yeah.
Anyway. So they put down the rug, put down the table, and then, put all the rooms in the tablecloth or wires, and then they all go down to the hole in the floor, that they, throw it right to the rug. So the only way to get that rug out was to cut it. So we had to run cutting it, and, oh, God, you cut the wood, get it back in, and like, you could just tell it was like totally.
Oh, yeah. Just one guy doing it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, I used to call him a mad scientist. He'd like kind of put it together up in his office and bring it all around. And the one where it's, they have a piece of like from a nuclear test site, a little sample there, and then they have the uranium glass, where you hit the button, and it spins and there's a lecture. It's trying to show you that the uranium glass, although it's spinning, it's more radioactive than the sample from the nuclear test site. And so Bruce was upstairs making that exhibit in the office. He's like, something's wrong with this thing. Like the diet count was just going off all the time. And then he took it to another room, and it wasn't going on. And he realized, like, there's a big window in his office, and it was all uranium glass. He's like, oh, that's it, not that much. And I've been sitting here. He took it all out, put it all out.
So what happened?
He was fine. Yeah. He was fine. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, he wound up retiring, but it had nothing to do with that, a couple of years.
Yeah, sure.
But it definitely freaked him out enough to remove all the uranium glass.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you go upstairs and like the office, which is probably Mary's office right now, has like the windows and there were shelves and there's probably maybe still glass pieces in it.
So Mary's office is moved inside the,
Yeah.
so that's.
Yeah, so the very next office after the conference room,
Oh,
in the window, there were shelves, and that's what our office was. And he's in there like soldering stuff, and something's wrong here, it's going on all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I just want you to move the glass then, that we made our hungry.
I don't know. supposed to be from speculating, which wasn't supposed to be harmful, but it was setting off the diagram. And it sets it off in the, did you guys remember that one? You hit a button, and it's almost like right when you enter the museum, it's on the right. And you hit a button, and this thing spins, and it's like a piece of reading glass.
I don't know.
I don't know.
And the one thing I remember is I think it was the chalkboard. or
Oh,
something.
yeah, the first time I went there,
And it's,
That's just beyond that.
I was at the Cape Cod Museum Trail meeting with, forget her name, was the previous director, before Mary.
Oh,
And-
Katie Campbell.
Hey,
Yeah, I think so. And I was like, oh, I was just there, and I got scared. She's like, oh, that's like, because it was the first thing I went to. She's like, that was your first impression. I was like, are you scared? I was like, yeah, kind of. Woke me up.
Yeah, because you coughed from the uranium. Oh, excuse me. Oh, yeah. And the handkerchief removed, yeah.
Yeah, my old job, we had during the class, nothing too, but we actually had their own national register. You know, that's what register was.
Oh.
Hi there, welcome, how are you?
Well, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Did you want to register for the event? Or are you? Oh, great. What's your name? Okay, yes. We have and are you a member of us? No. Okay, so it's on $10.
Listen, you.
Yep. How did you hear about the event?
I went on my station or something.
Oh, great. Have you been here before? This is our learning hall for our next special events. Next week we're having a book retreat here in December. The travel exhibition in Smithsonian. Sometimes people rent this out for different parties, stuff like that. And then during our opening season, our full open season is usually during October. And our historic homestead in 1678 is open for guided tours. Fortunately, not today. It's under the tops.
Oh.
It's, are you local?
Mhm.
So, in December, we're having the holiday homestead, which is Saturday, or no, Sunday, December 14th, and that house will be open. So that's the next time the house will be open. So
Do you have had a flyer with the?
we can get you on our email list if you like. And everything for that is on our website too. So yeah, I'll just put your email, get you on our email list, but you want me to write it. Sure. Okay. Yeah, you just put it right in that section.
And unfortunately, this doesn't print, with the.
What I thought was an easy email, but I had some really common names, so I put a number at the end of it. So how many times, oh, I sent an email, I never got it, and then it's because I just forgot to put like the number at the end of it and stuff.
I don't have a really common name for this. My last name is my name that is Andrews. But that's how that's spelled.
And I'll use, it's an SHEBAREKH. Okay, got it. So I'm going to read it here, that will look good. Sometimes you get, people that write it, smaller, or I'm like, is that like a C or O?
Yeah, sometimes if I write it fast, they'll put an LCH because the K doesn't connect for some reason.
Some people
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
And then just so you know too, since you haven't been here before, we have beautiful grounds that are open free year round. So if you like to hike, or like to go walks, we encourage people to check out our trails.
Yeah, that's what
Museum.
I'm doing.
Yeah, if you ever want to stop by, look at, we have people that come read books, look at a pond, things like that, so.
Yeah, we're from Indiana.
Great.
I work in the hospital.
So, okay. Very does, yeah, very
Oh,
usually
okay.
sends out an
But
email.
they're
So I think, it's
So is this building the same age?
No, this is, late 1800. One of the 9 descendants built this as a grange hall. So the grange is like a,
Appreciate it.
kind of like a descendant from farming communities, which this was. This kind
So,
of.
just,
So that's right, yeah. Because it's actually Benjamin I's second home, farm on East Spring Hill. And then they had the Bristol buildings like here.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. I'm not even sure if we need this, but my name is Amy Johnson. I'm the director here at the Nye Museum. It's a nice, intimate crowd today, but thank you so much for taking time out of your fall weekend to come here. I'd like to introduce Jeanne. Jeanne is a real estate lawyer and preservationist with more than 35 years of experience in research and preservation. She and her husband bought the 1795 farmhouse for C9 Moody Crocker in 2013, and it is the third family home they have restored. And she also runs, is it 3 Marie's Farm? Yeah, so thank you so much, Jeanne, for compiling this presentation for us. We're really looking forward to learning not only about the local history here, but some Nye history as well. And I just wanted to tell everyone too, in December, we're having a traveling exhibition from the Smithsonian, so that'll be the next big thing that we have going on here. And you can check out our website for information on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Amy. I'm going to talk a little bit about today. Today I'm going to talk about our house at 46 Cedar Street. But before I do that, I just wanted to introduce you to what I was doing for the last 25 years. Really quickly, this is the Air Mansion in Boston. It's the last surviving house designed by Louis Comfort Tiffany. We have a lot of information to go on when we were doing the restoration of this house. We have photographs from the family, we had paintings done by Tiffany for the interiors. We knew a lot about the owners. We even had an inventory for the house. The house is absolutely spectacular with one-of-a-kind murals on the exterior. These are all stone mosaics on the exterior of the building, which we were restoring. And then a spectacular balcony with mosaics. There were glass mosaics on the interior of the house, all designed by Tiffany, and a wonderful, really just gorgeous proscenium arch with mosaics and glass even on the stairs, and a trunk royale glass mosaic, and lighting fixtures designed by Tiffany, furniture designed by Tiffany, and beautiful glass vases designed by Tiffany as well. The work we did there was super detail oriented, and everything we did, we documented, of course. Before we did the work, we studied it and documented it, right down to each little tile of mosaics that we restored. We mocked up things before we actually did the restoration work. We had many, many work crews there doing really excellent work. And the before and afters, of course, are spectacular. So that's my background. That's where I come from. But I really actually love colonial and first period houses. That's where my heart is. So my husband and I were looking for a house. He wanted to go up to Vermont because we wanted some farmland, and he didn't know that how agricultural the Cape still is, actually. So I convinced him to come down here, and we found 46 Cedar Street. It has a barn and three and a third acres, so it's quite a substantial little farm that we could bring back to life, and of course it had a historic house, which is what I was looking for. This is where we're located, just to orient you. This is the Nye homestead where we are now. This is 46 Cedar Street. It's just down 6A and then up 149. We're in an historic district that was identified by the Mass Historic Commission. And these are the outlines of the district that we're in. There are a number of properties along there that are still in existence that are really important to the village of West Barnstable, and I'm going to walk you through them quickly so you're oriented. This is the West Barnstable Cemetery, which you can see on 6A. All the people from West Barnstable that I'm going to talk about today are all buried there. I just want to make a plug. This is not the same era as our house, but I want to make a plug for the old village store. If you go to West Barnstable, go there. They just restored it and just opened it. It's a wonderful coffee shop. It's wide open and really airy and lovely in there with lots of seating. Further down the road are the tan yards, which are now a trout farm. But originally, in Moody Crocker's day, it was a tanning yard. They needed water, of course, to do tanning. Hides were soaked for days, months, and they needed a tremendous amount of water. So the natural spring that occurred here enabled them to do the tanning work. This is Moses Crocker's house, just a couple of, about a half a mile down from the tanning yards, and their wonderful barn as well. He was related to Moody Crocker, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him. And then across the street is the Stephen Nye house, who was also one of the Sandwich Knives who then relocated to Barnstable. He was a cousin of Mercy Nye, and was actually quite prosperous. This house, as you can see, is really beautiful, and it's got an enormous barn as well in the back. This was farm country at the time Moody lived there. And then, of course, the hallmark of the neighborhood is the 1717 Meeting House. If you ever get an opportunity to go in there, it is an extraordinary building, really lovely. They broke off from the Meeting House in Barnstable to create a new parish, and that's how West Parish and West Barnstable got started, was when the church was built in 1717. And around the corner from the church is our house, Moody Crocker's house at 46 Cedar. The study, as I mentioned, was Mass Historic Commission. Before they put together a district, they do a big study about all the buildings that are in that particular district. And this study really identifies each of the buildings, which, as you can see, I don't think the date is on here. It was done in 1986. So it's hand-typed, and the information in it is not always solid. And I can't say I can blame them. These were the days well before computers and digital research. So people sat in the registry of deeds with big musty books around them, doing research, writing on index cards. And I think a lot of times it was complicated and things would get mixed up. And that's precisely what happened with the history of this house. The person who did the study noted that the house wasn't a Crocker family, which is correct, but they noted that it was owned by Moody and Moody Crocker, and they noted that Moody was the brother to Nathaniel and Edmund. There was a problem. This just didn't sound right to me, so I started to do some research. They also produced a chronology of the house, and these first three entries are wrong. When I started digging, I realized that they were confusing the two Moody's, which was not uncommon. All of these families would repeat, particularly men's names, through the generations, and there were often people with the same name but in different generations. But the information from the Mass Historic Commission was broadcasted everywhere. Everybody's been using this study as the basis for identifying the house, including the Barnstable Patriot, who put out an article about it, always referred to the Mass Historic Commission study. The Moody that they are thinking was the owner of the house was born in 1742. He was the son of Moses, and he was born in 1742. He was of a generation. His brother Nathaniel, John, Moody and Edmund were of one generation, but then you can see that Nathaniel actually also had a son named Moody. And he's the one that owned the house, not the elder Moody. There he is. And the reason we know that is because he was born in 1770. And that puts him about 30 years later than the earlier Moody. And we know that this is in the genealogy of the Crocker family, they mentioned that Moody, the elder, in Moses's will was not at home at the time that Moses wrote the will. In other words, he had gone off. This is Moses's original will, by the way. This is the kind of script that people were looking at when they were doing their research. It's thick, it's heavy, it's hard to read, and so you can understand that they probably got a little bit confused when they were making decisions. Wills are really important documents when you're doing research, particularly for this era, because they provide more information than just family relations. They can also indicate other information about how these people were working. You can see that he said, I was given bequeath to my son Nathaniel and to my son John, their heirs and assigns forever, 1/4 of an acre of land where the tan yard now is, in such form as may be convenient for carrying on that business to be by them divided. So he's telling you what he does. He's a tanner and he owns the tan yards. We did not know that prior to seeing his will. Also, he's telling us that his sons were in the business, they were taking it over. And he's leaving it to the two sons to figure out how to continue to run the business. He also then goes on to say, and I give a bequeath to my son Moody Crocker and Edmund Crocker, their sons, the southmost great room of my house and the bedroom adjoining the chamber above it. I love this description. You have to think about this. He's giving specific rooms in his house to specific sons. And this was also not uncommon to divide up your house among your surviving kids who were living at home still and often stayed at home. But this is kind of the first vestiges of a condo. You know, these are people that are sharing a house, but they have specific rooms. And then he gives the land from the southmost corner of my house to the widow Russell's fence to be by them divided. The importance of widow Russell I'm going to explain later on, but this is how a lot of people describe property. The fence. In another deed I saw that he used, they talked about the area where there were a great amount of grapevines. My own property, the deed says by a stone wall, by the remnants of stone wall. So this is all they had in order to describe property. And it's interesting too that for his daughter, he gives her the right to live in the house so long as she's not married. So when you got married as a woman, you were expected, of course, to go live somewhere else. You couldn't stay in the house that you grew up in. And then he bequeaths to, and this is probably where the researcher stopped. She saw, oh, he gave the property to Edmund and Moody, that's why they have the property. But always read on, particularly in the legal documents, because it says, I give and bequeath to my sons Nathaniel, Moody, and Edmund, all my real and personal estate, not divided here and divided. And if my son Moody should not live to return home again, what I have given to him, I give to my son Nathaniel and Edmund. So he's telling us Moody is not there. He is not present. This elder Moody went off somewhere, we don't know where, probably on a ship somewhere, probably was a sailor, never returned home. So if you had read the beginning part of this will, you would have thought, oh, Moody the elder got the property. No, Moody the elder is gone, he was never there. So we know that the person that owned our house was actually Moody the younger. By the way, if you heard a lot of Nathaniel in that reading of the will, so did John, his oldest son. John Crocker was appalled when the will was read, that he was not getting more from his dad. And he actually went to the probate court and demanded that the will be disapproved, it's called. because he felt he hadn't been given enough by his father. He even claimed that his father, at the time that he wrote the will, was non-compos mentis. In other words, wasn't mentally capable of writing a will. This is kind of scandalous to go in there and claim that your father was not able to write his own will. People, by the way, often would get illnesses at this era and know they were going to die, within a certain time. And it's not uncommon to see wills that are written very shortly before the death of the individual. I'm a lawyer and I do a lot of wills for people. We tend not to do that these days. Most people have a will, they put it away forever, but they don't tend to do it close to death the way it was in that time period. But anyway, the judge calls up all the witnesses to the will and decides actually that he was capable of writing a will, so the will stands. We know also that this was Moody the Younger because he died in 1839, and it says on his gravestone that he was 70 years of age. If this had been Moody the Elder, he would have been almost 100 years old. Possible, but unlikely. So there's other evidence that suggests that. Next to him is Mercy Crocker's, his Mercy Nye Crocker's gravestone. She died actually just shortly after him. We don't know what he died of in 1839. I was looking around. I'm sorry, that shouldn't be 1830. It should be 1839. I'm assuming that it was probably an outbreak of flu or some other viral issue because they died so close to one another in time frame. This is what the gravestones look like today, by the way. It's virtually illegible. And luckily, the previous pictures you saw were from findagrave.com. So if you ever need to find somebody's grave, it's a great resource. It was done many years ago, and a lot of these graves were still legible. What do we know about Moody and Mercy? Well, we know at least that Moody could write, or at least he could write his name. He signed a affidavit for Zacchaeus Jenkins, who had served in the Revolutionary War, and when you wanted a pension, you had to actually submit a lot of paperwork to the United States government to try to get paid for that work. And this is Zacchaeus's application. This is Zacchaeus' signature. It's just an X. So he didn't know how to write. But Moody did. Moody wrote his name on the bottom there. He served as a witness to Zacchaeus' application. So there's an assumption that he probably had a little bit of schooling and knew how to write. He lived in Barnstable and grew up there. This is the first census in the United States. It took place in 1790. And the census actually, we're lucky that Moody lived during the time when the census had just started, because the census also provides a tremendous amount of information about the town. There is also a genealogy of the Nye family, and we know that Mercy was the daughter of Lemuel Nye, and she was born in Sandwich, but they all moved to Barnstable. And luckily, the genealogy notes also that she married Moody Crocker. So we know that they were, this is another confirmation that they were a couple. And she did die in 1776, as I noted on her gravestone. The first census is a little complicated and hard to read, but it does give some information. We know who was living near whom. You see Jonathan Nye, this is Lemuel Nye, that's Mercy's dad. And then they were living next to Elizabeth Russell and Nathaniel Crocker. Now remember, Nathaniel Crocker is the father of Moody. Those are the two men that are living in the house, the two young boys. That was Moody. One of them was Moody. And the two women that were living in Lemuel Nye's house were his wife and Mercy. So they are living nearby each other. Likely, of course, that they met while they were hanging out in the yard. And Moody, as you can see, was 6 years older than she. We also know that he was quite an ambitious person. He bought a lot of property. In 1795, he bought 8 acres from the Russells. You saw Elizabeth Russell in that in the census. She was living across the street or nearby him. He bought her property. And then he purchased 13 acres of woodland the same year. And then in 1825, he also purchased some marshland over in Scorton area. So he was really ambitious in 1795, and probably because he was in love with Mercy and wanted to get married. We don't know where he got the money. He worked as a tanner. And deeds also in this day and age would often know what your profession was. So this deed in 1825 notes that he's still a tanner at that time period. So he was probably buying property in 1795 to get married. I think, and this is also a land schedule from that same time period showing the land he owned. Here's the 7 acres that he bought, and the 13, the top line, and the 13 acres of woodland below it. He bought the land, of course, to get married. And in the next set of census in 1800, we find him again. He is, let me see, there he is. So he's now in the census, which means that he's a homeowner. You have to be a head of a household in order to be in the census. And Elizabeth Russell is no longer there. So he's bought Elizabeth Russell's property, and he is now there, and he has children. He has 3 boys, and his wife is living with him, of course. And Lemuel Nye is also up there, but he's now only got 1 person in the household. So his kids have left. Mercy's left. She's gone to marry Moody, and they are out of the house, but just around the corner. And then the children that they had, this is the original intake, the original form. Somebody would sit at a desk and people would walk in and report that they had the children and when they were born. These were actual reports that were done. Sometimes they'll even say his father by his father. The father came in, Moody came into the office and told the scribe, these are when my children were born. But you can see it's really difficult to read. And also there were a lot of smudges. These were, of course, pens that had to be dipped in ink constantly, and there were a lot of blotches and smudges. So the dates are not always correct. This up here, by the way, is a transcription that was done probably in the early 1800s, in the mid 1800s and early 1900s, where somebody actually wrote it out. And oftentimes, if you rely on those, they can be wrong too, because they're transcribing something they can't read. This is when we jump ahead to the 1830 census, we see Moody here as well. And the surprising thing is that instead of having less children, you think 20 years later, all these kids have moved out, he has more. There are now 9 people living in the house, and they're not older kids, they're actually younger children. So what's the story here? This helps kind of fill in some blanks and gives us a better picture of who Moody was. To completely understand it, though, you have to jump ahead to his will, where he describes, again, as I said, some aspects of his personal life. He gives, in the will, he gives to Mercy and the widow of my son Willard the improvement of my house in which I now live together. So what he's done, what those additional people are and children were, was Moody taking in his son, who has probably become ill in his 30s, and he comes with his wife, Mary. Polly was a common nickname for people named Mary. He comes with his wife, Polly, and their 5 children. And he's ill, is the implication, and needs help. So they take him into this little house, all these people, 9 now, from going from a small house of, at the time, probably 3 people up to 9. But he dies just 3 years later after he moves into the house. Moody takes care of his wife, his son's wife, and their 5 children. And he leaves the bulk of his estate to these grandchildren. And I find it kind of moving that he names them all, including the daughter, his granddaughter, by the way, which is quite unusual. I give to my grandchildren George, Henry, Josiah, and Rebecca, children of Willard Crocker, deceased, the reversion of the estate. In other words, after my wife and Mary have died, you get everything. It's kind of a moving portraiture of him, as a caring grandfather. I just want to mention quickly that one of his other sons was actually quite successful. This was Josiah Crocker, his oldest son, went to Harvard to study medicine. This wasn't terrifically uncommon that you would go up to a school if you were interested in a profession. You wouldn't actually get a degree, you would just sit in the lecture halls and take in as much information as you possibly could. And then go back to wherever you were coming from and hang out your shingle. And that's exactly what he did. He went to Dennis and opened a practice. He also actually died sadly before Moody Crocker, and we don't know why. But I do want to note that after Moody's death, everything was put up for auction. And the reason for that is because he had debts. He had $250.49 in debt, and he didn't have enough cash to pay. So under the laws of probate, what you do is as the administrator of the estate, you put all the land and other assets up for sale. And that's exactly what happened here. This is from the Barnstable Patriot. You have to post a notice that this is going to happen so that people will show up for the auction. Then you collect the money from the sale. I'm happy to report that what happened here was that George, that oldest grandson, actually stepped up and bought the property. So he kept it in the family. He was able to pay off his grandfather's debts. I also would like to think that this is a scenario that was not uncommon, that nobody really went to the auctions, that they knew the family members would show up, and they wanted to ensure that the family members actually kept the property in their family. This is the property in 1951. Your historian gave me this, which is great. John, right? Yeah. So this is an aerial from 1951, and you can see the property. These are the 8 acres that Moody bought originally with the dwelling house thereon. And it was farmed all up even through the 1950s. It was really open. Today, it looks like this. The property's been shrunk down. They sold off the back 5 acres to the farm behind them. That's now Meeting House Farm. I don't know if any of you know about that area, but so it's now 3 1/4, about 3 1/3 acres, and very heavily wooded because we are not farming. It's very pastoral looking. It certainly still looks like farmland, and Moody had set up all these stone walls everywhere to allow for different pastures, back doors on the barn that allowed the cows and other animals to come out. There was a fence here that allowed them to go across the street to grazing land across the street. So it looks still very pastoral and farmland-like. This is the backyard. Parts of it are still very open, but obviously the trees have taken over the majority of it. The question, though, becomes how old is this house? We don't really know. We know that when Moody purchased it in 1795, it was 8 acres with a dwelling house standing on said land. The Crocker family, of course, likes to say that Moody built this house. We're not quite so sure that that's the case. This could have been the house that was standing there that was owned by the Russells before Moody purchased it. You can't really tell from the layout of the house either the age. This is a classic Cape house. You'll see these all over the Cape. This is the layout of our house, a parlor, which was always called the East Room, a small bedroom off to the other side, the keeping room, which was the major kitchen, seating area, and off of which was a buttery. By the way, that does nothing to do with butter. It's the buttery was where you kept big butts, which were barrels filled with your the things you needed for cooking. So hence the name buttery. And next to it, a small boarding room, which was where often pregnant women, older women would stay because it was next to the kitchen. It was one of the warmest rooms in the house. Now, the layout of our house and the finishes are classic for Cape Cod. And you can see this. One of my most favorite places to go to look up historic elements is this Historic American Building Survey, called Habs Hair for short. It is online at the Smithsonian, at the Library of Congress. It's a great resource if you ever have a chance to just scroll around in it. It's a lot of fun. In the 1930s, as part of the Works Project Administration, they sent out unemployed photographers and engineers and architects to study historic houses across the United States. And this was the result. They took a lot of photographs of interiors and did amazing drawings. So these are just some of the photographs from that study, and you'll see over and over again the same features in each of these houses. These were kind of little cookie cutter. They were built by the same house rights. There was a program, a set size, a set layout, and even though these houses, of course, were built for individuals, they often repeated this style over and over again. And it varied, and it started in about the mid 1700s and went all the way up to about 1820 or so. So the house could probably be in any of those categories based on how similar it is to these photographs. By the way, the Nye House has a beautiful set of drawings in the house here. Some of the architects who did the drawings were not particularly skilled. They were really draftsmen. This person who did the Nye House really was an extraordinary draftsperson. And you can see just the level of detail and attention to different features that he did, even right down to the molding profiles. This was a really skilled architect. His name was Benjamin Adams Buck. He appears nowhere else. I've never seen his name. I haven't been able to find him, but what a treasure. If you go into that house here and just put his name in as an architect, you'll find some extraordinary drawings, and these are all available online. But back to the house, that there wasn't, as in the plan that you saw was that original house, and behind it are in this picture, 3 L's. That one on the end is an outhouse, and the other 2 are 2 additions to the house. I call this the new kitchen because it was in 1830 they added it onto the house, which was pretty typical. As new modern ideas came about and cast iron stoves became all the rage for cooking, you needed a separate space for it. It was often couldn't fit into the old chimneys, so they would build a separate room, put the cast iron stove in there, and move the kitchen into that space. And then in 1975, the owners of the house added a modern kitchen. So that's that last L that's on the back there. This is the modern kitchen, by the way. This is the house as we found it in 2013 when we bought it. So some of these photographs are existing conditions. This is what it looked like when we bought it. This is the next L. This is the 1830s kitchen. And you can see up here on the wall, there's a brick opening. That's where the flue pipe for the stove was. So the stove sat right in the middle of the room there. And even outside, there are remnants of the chimney for that flue pipe that are still there. Then we went into the keeping room. We went into the original house, and that it was. Everything in this house, by the way, is intact. It wasn't terribly well cared for because they simply didn't have the money. But as we always say, poverty preserves. The fact that this family didn't have a lot of money was great, actually, because it allowed the house to remain pretty much just the way it was when it was originally built. You can see there's a huge fireplace there with a beehive oven next to it. This was the way they had decorated it over the years. And then the parlor, which was the room where you would meet the pastor or other company. This is the way it looked. There are those double doors and that fireplace that you saw in the photographs. And the double doors going into the boarding room and to the keeping room on the other wall. Everything there, everything intact. This is the small bedroom, also virtually intact. The floors are original. All the paneling and fireplace is original, just lots of old wallpaper. There's the original fireplace in there too, and you should recognize some of those pictures from before. And then the doorway going out into the little hallway that goes upstairs There's a wonderful original 5 light set of windows above the door. Those were still there. And the stairs going up, very steep, up to the top floor. That's where all the children slept, is up in the top floor. No rooms, just a big open space. Everybody, I'm sure, had little bumps everywhere. And the only difference with our house, and unfortunately I don't have photographs from upstairs, I don't know why this happened, but the only difference in our house was that they had actually created a little room up there in the back. And I think it was probably for Polly, the mother. She needed a little bit of privacy, so I suspect they gave her her own little room up there. And then this was the bathroom, obviously 1950s, vintage, 60s. And underpinning the whole house, very much like the Nye homestead, are these logs, not even hewn, just at the ends, so to allow them to be seated, to sit in a joist, and flat only on one edge. They even left the bark on the bottom side, and this is not uncommon on a rubble foundation. This is still holding up in our house. We haven't had to do anything. We're very lucky. So they're like petrified wood, I will say. They're some of the hardest wood I've ever seen. So I know that here at the Nye homestead, a lot of this to be replaced, but they're those same logs. This was kind of standard practice for building. You didn't put a lot of effort into something you weren't going to see. We also have a barn on the property, and the time we bought it, it was sinking into the ground. It was really in danger of collapsing. It was in bad shape. There were dog kennels out the back of it. They had added a garage door, which had led to kind of this instability where the building was almost tipping to the right. We went to the, and this is the interior, which was really amazing. These are still the stalls for the horses and the cows, and the whole barn smelled of animals. It was really very pastoral. But you can see everything hand hewn. Or pit sawn. So this is an early barn. This is probably from the 1780s or so. But you can see the floor was decaying badly, and there was a lot of rot around the lower level of the building. But also look up above, there are logs. That's how the roof is made of. Just again, untreated logs. These weren't going to be seen, so nobody cared. Overlapping to give them additional structural strength, and everything else just pinned with wooden pins. We talked to Charlie Hayden, who's a building mover, and we hired him to come and pick up the barn and put in a proper foundation. When we went to the Historical Commission to ask to do this, they were all white as sheets. We went up to the desk, we said, this is what we want to do at the meeting, and they all instantly relaxed. They said, we thought you were coming in to tear down the barn. And we were like, no, this is why we bought the property, we want the barn. And Charlie Hayden's an amazing person. He's like the building whisperer. He will walk into a building and tell you whether this thing is going to survive if you fix it up. And he said, she's got good bones. And he proceeded to jack the building up. You can see that they use steel girders to jack the whole thing up and put in a foundation underneath it. He rebuilt all the bottom of the barn. These are massive timbers, oak timbers that we got from New Hampshire that he then sistered to the existing joists so that the building stability would be there. We had to raise the building up a little bit to get the foundation in, so it's a little taller than it was. But that's not uncommon. As I showed you, the other barns in the area were actually quite tall as well. So this was not too disruptive, I don't think, of the setting. We closed off that garage door, which was causing structural problems, and now the barn is standing straight and is in good shape. We use it all the time. People asked us, why did you do that first? And the reason is we knew we were going to do a lot of work on the house, so we had to have a place to put the machinery and other objects we needed to do work in the house. So it really was a top priority. On the house itself, we had all sorts of problems. We had rotting sills when we opened up the base of the house. This is even in the 1976 kitchen, there was rot underneath the sills. So we jacked up the house in a number of places and just replaced those. We kept the original foundation, by the way, and we have not put in a basement. We had rotting boards underneath the shingles. These are the original boards that were on the house. And you can see they would just put these enormously thick pit-sawn boards up on to put a facing on the house, and then they would put the shingles on over there, over those. We had to cut out huge portions of that and then replace it. So the house looked a little hodgepodge for a while with these mismatching shingles, but all those areas you see there all had to be treated, everything removed and replaced to make sure the house would continue to stand. In the back, we've done some work to just bring the house back to its original features. This first wing, as I mentioned, was built in 1830. These are not 1830 windows. These are vinyl windows that were added in the 1980s. They were horrific. They don't speak to the era of the house, and they were actually rotting terribly. We did have pictures from 1971 that the owners that we purchased it from had taken, and we saw that this is what it looked like originally. So in 1971, there were 2 windows there, and they are very much of the Victorian era, the 1830s era. They are 6/6 rather than 12/12, the way the older house had. So it had kind of a Victorian, that era look to it, and that's what we wanted to bring it back to. We weren't going to put in a 12/12. We don't want to pretend that this is an older part of the house, because it's not. It's 1830. By the way, when we started doing the work, we noticed that the windows were off kilter. You can see one is lower than the other, and we didn't know why. And we wanted to put them more equally, but when we opened up the wall, what we discovered, this is kind of hard to see, was that there was cross bracing in there that went up. This was not a real structure when it was built. It was a shed. And this was not uncommon for these houses to have sheds out the back. You would have a wood shed, you would have possibly a wagon shed. This is where you worked in the winter. When you came out your back door, you had a little shelter in the warm sun, but they were not enclosed. And actually, the pictures from the 1970s still show one of the sheds. Where the kitchen is now, there's a shed. And so these were, it's kind of confirmed our understanding of how the house worked. And we've talked to neighbors who also have historic houses, and a lot of times they'll tear down these buildings, these L's that were added on from sheds, simply because they weren't designed to be enclosed. We're lucky enough that for some reason, ours is very sturdy and well built. Then what we did, when we had windows made, as I mentioned, that are of that era, 6/6, we had to reclad the facade, and we used floorboards from upstairs. So very much in keeping with the style of the building that they had done before, we were reusing materials to ensure that they stayed on the property as well. So we went from this to that, which I think is a much more, obviously it's much more in keeping with the house. We also had that screen door made. We modeled it after a Victorian screen door on that old kitchen. The front of the house, the 1970s pictures showed no shutters except for on the front door, which was also very typical. No shutters on most colonial post-period houses. We did get rid of, we're sad about it, we did get rid of these shutters, which were added, which was a Victorian addition to most of these houses. They were beautifully made. I wish we hadn't trashed them, but unfortunately they went out the door. But when we did need to replace the door, which was from the 1950s. And what we did was get photographs of doors from other houses in the area. We found quite a few examples of what's called the double cross, which is 2 crosses on the door. And we like the proportions of that. They're mostly on houses with these 5 lights above them. So we felt it was an appropriate match, and we had the door made by a company in Rhode Island. and also a batten door that we can put on the front, which was also in keeping. The other thing we did was we lowered the property. We actually, this stone was completely buried. Over time, of course, the soil builds up on a property, and so we removed about 8 inches of soil around the whole perimeter of the house so that the front door would be, that front stone would be freestanding. Interior, unfortunately, I don't have pictures. I was working on it, but what we did was remove all the old wallpaper and all the old trim. There had been they had put some molding trim around the edges. That was from, added in the 70s as well. We removed all that. We brought it back to its original appearance, and we painted all the wood. I know that sometimes when you go to see house museums, that wood is raw, but that was not what they did in that era. That was a vestige of our love for colonial days. We thought that everything had to be a natural wood. In first period houses, most people painted the wood. So we went ahead and painted every wood surface in the house. This is the original fireplace that is still there in the house, and the original beehive and the storage space down below. Luckily, when the owners before us put in the modern heating system, they did it in a very sensitive fashion. They put it up through the beehive oven so that it wouldn't interrupt anything else. I'm sad because it doesn't allow us to use our beehive. We had a fireplace expert in. He's worked at Sturbridge Village and Plymouth. We're restoring fireplaces from this era. And he tried to get that brick out, but he couldn't. So unfortunately, we probably won't have a working beehive of it. But the interior of it is completely intact, and you can see where they were using it. It's completely black. This is, by the way, is that brick insert for the modern fireplace, modern heating system downstairs. We stripped, as I mentioned, all the old wallpaper off, and we put new on. I'm a wallpaper fanatic. And I chose a lot of designs that I felt were not, trying to imitate colonial design, but had a colonial sensibility. And that's often what they would do, is put wallpaper up to add to these, add some color to the rooms. There are still some surprises that we need to. All the original doors are there, but we need to explore. This is the back door, and there is something up under this panel there, probably, possibly glass. We just don't know. We're going to explore that at some point in time. This is that shed. This is that the original 1830s kitchen. It's now our dining room. It's filled with sunlight, so you can imagine somebody working out there in the cold, with the warmth of the sun coming in. These houses were always oriented to make the most of natural light. And this table that we have as our dining room table, we found in the barn. It was one of the few pieces that are one few relics that we found in the house. This was originally a cranberry sorting table. It had an edge on it so that as the women, mostly women, sat and sorted the cranberries, they would pull them down towards them and roll them along that edge to the next person all the way down the table. We took that edge off, but it makes a beautiful table. The finish on it is just incredible. We haven't done anything to it. It's just from so many hands, from so many cranberries. It's really a lovely piece. This is the parlor. It's still in existence, of course, and I've added wallpaper. We've painted all the walls, and we painted the floors, by the way, throughout the house. It's the same color to add some continuity. All the floors in these houses originally too were probably painted. There are those double doors that you saw in the photographs of the other houses and the house here. And again, the double doors going into the bathroom. Now our bathroom, but then the boarding room and the keeping room. This is the little bedroom on the side. We actually use it as our bedroom. We call it the master bedroom. And it's tiny, but it's big enough for a double bed. And it's a lovely room with lots of light. And I did yellow on the walls there because I felt like it made the best use of the light in there. And this is that original fireplace. So that's still intact in the house as well. And then we added the bathroom to the morning room in the buttery. And I had a picture, but I can't find it. This is the buttery divided up. There's a wall here, and then we have a shower there. But when we were building it, you could see in that shower space the ghosting from where the shelves had been from when they originally used this as a buttery. So most of these houses have turned those areas into bathrooms. Lovely windows, lots of light. It's a really nice space. The kitchen, which was, circa 1976, we kept. And I always tell people, look at that cabinetry. 1970s cabinetry was actually really good quality, really solid wood, beautifully made. So we just painted it, and it's really, it's one of the nicest kitchens we've ever had in terms of location of objects and space usage. It's really quite charming, and as you can see, lots of light. And those stairs going upstairs, we painted. Now this looks like we painted all different colors on each stairs, but it's not. It's all the same. It's just an illusion because the sunlight, as it spills down the stairs, it has different gradients. So it's really charming. And this is that top floor. It was just a big raw open space when we bought the house. We've enclosed it, but and it's now kind of a dormitory style. We have lots of beds up there. My daughters stay up there with their friends. But very much like it was originally used by Moody, Crocker, and his grandchildren. There are lots of spaces up there. And this is the original chimney breast going all the way up through the house, from downstairs all the way up to through the roof. And we, of course, we have plenty of space for everybody, including the dogs. And we've kept the original beams up there. Some of them are pit sawn, some of them are hand hewed with pegs still exposed. And up there, we also found this flag. It's been really hard to find some information about this, but apparently in the 1970s, there was a movement to make Cape Cod its own little state. And this was part of the push to do that. So it was a really nice find. It had been all rolled up and put in on the rafters. So we had it framed and put in our living room, in our dining room. We've also found a lot of objects in the house, a lot of pottery in the basement. There's a small area that was underneath the original buttery. There were probably a shaft, probably a trap door that you would go down into the buttery if you wanted to, or go outside into the buttery. So they, in the basement area, they would keep melons, pumpkins, things like that that could survive, and other objects that needed to be kept relatively cold in bowls. So it's not unusual to find pottery in the basements. This is all hand thrown and hand fired, of course, and we also found under the floors upstairs a whole bunch of objects, a lot of toys, and that's where the kids were, which was upstairs. So it's not unusual, it's not a big surprise to find a few toys up there under the floor. And we also found a ring, a metal ring. I don't know who it belonged to and what its story is. These are all hand-forged nails, by the way, over on the right. So that's the story of 46 Cedar, and I thank you very much.
Do you have a question for you?
Yeah.
When you said that you found the cranberry sorting table, was there a history of that at the property too? Or?
So I don't think on the property itself, but there are cranberry bogs all around us, actually. And one of our dogs got away, and I chased him over a mile into the woods. And I came to this area that was solid wood, but raised berms everywhere. That had been an old cranberry bog, but there were trees everywhere with these raised berms going through. So cranberry bogs were all over this area at the time, and much more prolific than they are today. And I think everybody, it was all kind of all hands on deck when cranberry season came around. So even if you weren't a farmer of cranberries, you would go to your neighbors and help them with the process.
So perhaps that's how it ended up in the barn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I also think they just kept a lot of junk. You know, people, they needed a board for up in the loft, right? And they find a tray table from somebody else that was discarding it.
Notice that on a couple of pictures look like the boards were slanted.
Yeah, they are. In some places they are, yeah. We kept all the original floors except for upstairs where they were really bad. The upstairs, I don't think was never really heavily lived in, so the floors weren't particularly rough up there. But downstairs there, we don't have the big wide boards, but we have boards that are, 15 inches or so. And they're lovely, so we've kept them all, but yeah, they're not in such great shape in places.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.